how do they pull it off? How does this show do such a good job? I mean, welcome back, guys, to my Superman and Lois Season 4, Episode 1 and 2 recap, review, and breakdown. I am so glad to be talking about it in dedicated videos again, because the first 2 hours of this season, that double drop just really hit me. And I'd be so hard pressed to believe if it didn't hit you. Without wasting too much time here, I just want to go throughout the events of the first 2 episodes, maybe get into a couple of theories here and there, because it for sure subverted my expectations in a couple of ways, especially even how episode 2 ended. So we'll get more into that in a little bit. I would love to know your own thoughts on the first 2 episodes, any theories that you have going into this as well. So of course, go ahead, leave a like on this video if you do go on to enjoy it. I think it's going to need a bit of support because it's going to be a bit of a slow grower, and subscribe for more videos like this, of course. So, man, the battle continues right at the beginning. And I thought, with the way they released that preview at Comic-Con, it would have actually been a complete sequence. But I like how they scattered it throughout the episode, because it just shows you how long Superman and Doomsday, or their version of Doomsday, if you will, were battling. It was just incredible. And this is what I mean about this show. Like, of course, it's not exactly like Hollywood level movie blockbuster budget, but they do such a good job given the budget that they have. And we really do just kind of continue where we left off when we cut to the Kent farm with Jordan putting out the fire in the barn of when Doomsday and Superman took off from. And they're trying to listen out for Sam Lane's heart, because we can't forget he got kidnapped by Gretchen, who isn't Gretchen. And by the way, maybe I could have done more due diligence before recording this review, but I don't know who she's actually supposed to be, as well as Luthor's lady, if you will. I feel like there was some kind of connection that they had, possibly romantically. I don't know, but she gives me more of like a Mercy Graves kind of role. And I don't know if Gretchen is meant to be like an older Eve Teschmacher, and we had Otis there, which was really cool. So I don't know if that's their 2 roles. And this lady's role, I'm just going to call her the lady, I suppose. Maybe one of you guys could tell me down in the comments below. She seems to be more his right hand. Like, she's the one liaising back and forth between Luthor Corp and, handling his business. So it does give Mercy Graves vibes to me, but I wouldn't be surprised if, they gave her an original name. And I really enjoyed, as this episode unfolded, the flashbacks that we got, because it really cements in not only the severity of what Superman is dealing with and how he might not come back from this, but the somewhat preparation of losing Clark in the family as Lois reminisces over these various flashback scenes. And one of them was a really pleasant surprise to when she first found out that Clark was Superman. Now, ever since season 1, we got that flashback to when he was hovering over the fields, but we got an expanded scene after that, just carrying on the conversation of Lois taking that in. And let's just say they get up to a certain fun activity between them both. And I found it quite sweet how in this iteration, Lois was Clark's first. I did find that like a sweet touch to this Tyler Hoechlin version of Clark, and how he had that special moment with her. One that was truly embedded in love, if you know what I mean. Not to sound too wish-washy there, but it, sometimes people are like that, and for Clark, it was that for him. But then we go to Luthor, and he's bought this hotel in Smallville, and we know that he's up to no good, and I feel like these first 2 episodes do such a good job with Michael Cudlitz. Oh my god, I know I feel like I'm going to be blowing smoke this whole episode, but I am. But I'm so happy with Michael Cudlitz's Lex. I know we got that impression of him last season in some amazing scenes, but this first episode was good for him, but as we get into the second episode, it was his master plan, if you will, and the kind of sadism behind it, the gleeful energy he's getting out of inciting what he's felt like with what Lois did to him upon Lois's family. It's just so messed up, but also the perfect entertainment of villainy that we want to see out of a Lex. But this is why I like what they've done with this Lex in this show, because I think it is quite hard in a show that's set 20 years into Superman's career. Picking up a story there for the family and just showing Superman in day-to-day life is a task in of itself, but it's also hard to like give that character of Lex something that is just as compelling. And I feel like they have done an organic one with tying it back to how he lost 17 years. He feels like he lost his daughter because of that, even though I think that's going to be a thing that comes in later where we learn a little bit more, and that will really be the bullet to Lex's heart later on this season, where she just completely rejects him. Just kind of random tangent theory there. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's such a good drive for Lex. Like, obviously, as an audience, we can't condone his actions, but it is a compelling one, and where just as, Jordan feels convicted to do whatever needs to be done to, save his dad, he feels just as driven to be like, I'm dead serious about what I'm about to do. If these first 2 episodes, which I think is arguably right up there with his best scenes in the last season, are just a taste of what's to come, I am so incredibly as you can tell, I'm so passionate about what they've done here, and I'm so passionate with this casting. He is impeccable as Lex Luthor. Like, probably, I know this may sound premature to say, but I did say it last season, just with some of those scenes we got in this 20 years later Lex, appreciating the iteration we're dealing with here, it is arguably one of my favorite Lexes already. Which is when we got another flashback in where, and this is something I really appreciated as well, because one of my critiques, even though I understood it's its own iteration, so, I guess they could do their own thing, but last season I felt like there wasn't really a history between Superman and Lex Luthor. And as a Superman fan, a big Superman fan, that felt like, okay, like, they don't need to show it, because obviously we're 20 years later, but it really did feel like the beef was just, okay, Lois did something to him 17 years ago, put him away behind bars for something he didn't do. Granted that he's still a guy who got wrapped up in all kinds of things that he kind of probably low-key deserves it anyway, but, you still need to follow the letter of the law, so Lois probably would have done it that way if she knew she was wrong back then. But it was still like Lois Lane's main villain, to be honest. And that still feels like the case in a way, but what I liked here is that in those flashbacks, there was reports on the news of no one hearing about Superman. People were worried about him because assailants were seen using kryptonite weaponry. And Clark comes back in the Daily Planet offices, and he mentioned that Luthor was supplying that kryptonite weaponry. There's mentions of Intergang, which was cool. So you can clearly see here, even that amount of time ago, Lex was still doing things to find, or he had already found, Superman's weakness. He was supplying weaponry to people who could take Superman down with kryptonite. That is all I need. I'm glad that's something that they addressed here. It may not be as much of a decorated backstory between them both, because we still have to bear in mind that Superman was obviously in his early days 20 years ago. We've seen those flashbacks, and then basically for most of it, 17 years he was in prison. So yeah, there isn't like a grand I would say super traditional comics reflection of their dance between each other for the past 17 years, but it's still, again, something that I digged, because they showed that Lex really probably resented Superman even back then. Now, when we see Sam Lane, he's bound to a chair with Gretchen, even though it's not Gretchen. So again, maybe somebody can tell me if she's been credited, or in the news that I haven't been so locked into, maybe her casting was announced. Another thing I also liked here is that when we cut back to General Lane, he offers Gretchen, whoever this lady is, a chance to get out of whatever Luthor might have on her that compels her to do this work for him. And she wishes that was true, but she fears him too much, which just shows, again, even outside of this whole daughter thing that Lex is justifying his actions with, he's still, this decorates how he still is a horrible man. He's got all of this stuff on all of these other people who's controlling them to do these diabolical things for him. But in this moment, he manages to escape, but not really, because he gets knocked out again by Otis. We have Luthor then go to the diner where Jonathan and Jordan are at, and it's like, my God. Which is when we get a nice flashback scene to Lois and Luthor all of those years ago, right before he went to prison, with quite a different look. Like, he's got his full ginger hair, ginger beard. You can tell that this Lex is still the Lex with the bad reputation back then, but there's a slight difference in him, because he's not fully driven with such conviction of hatred like he is now. So I would actually like to see more flashbacks to this Lex, just to get a glimpse of the man who would, source kryptonite to weaponry that people could buy to take out Superman. I don't know if we are going to get that, but I did appreciate seeing a flashback to right before he was put away. This is when we have Sam Lane being thrown into a grave, about to be buried alive. Even Luthor turns up himself. This is one of those moments where it subverted my expectations, because as soon as they were burying him alive, I felt like he was going to be safe, because I thought going into this season they would actually kill General Lane. Not right away, maybe in episode 2 or something like that. But as soon as they were no longer going to put one in the head and one in the heart, as Gretchen was initially going to do, and just kind of, allow him to suffocate to death, it felt obvious and predictable that Jordan was going to get there in time. Even though, to be fair, and I know this sounds messed up because I really like Sam Lane's character, and I didn't want him to die, but a part of me was like, it would have been really kind of, like, maybe it would have been too crushing, but if they subverted my expectations again, and Jordan got there, was digging him up, but by the time he got to him, unfortunately, he had already run out of air a few minutes ago. That would have been crushing, but again, maybe arguably too crushing with everything that this family is already dealing with. But I was still thinking, are they going to do that? Just maybe with some of the cutbacks this season, and maybe not having some of the actors as involved in all of the episodes that they have been in previous seasons. Now, Otis informs Lex about what happened, and he even says that Lois showed up with a kid that everyone's calling Superboy. So we finally, I don't think we've had the name drop before this moment. And, it makes me wonder if we're going to actually get an upgraded suit by the finale of this show. I also really liked Sam Lane's faith in Superman. He's always coming back, or whether it was in the hospital when Lois was filling him in on everything that's happened. He's still like, nothing in this universe has been able to kill Superman. And she says, well, there might be now, which is when we go back to the fight again. And this is at the moment in where that preview we got a few months back cuts out, because Clark is just really charging up his heat vision in this moment. This is like his last ditch attempt, because you can see him try and look back at Earth, because he knows that this might be the last time I really give it one last look, because if this doesn't work, then this could be it. And that was the case, because we have Doomsday just coming in, and his fist makes contact with a huge punch to Clark's chest, and thus ripping out his heart. You could tell that his chest had a hole in it, but then you had that little freaking rock getting in the way from seeing it, for probably age-restricted reasons. But then again, when Doomsday drops him off on like the high street of Smallville, when Lois goes to the body and turns him around, you can see, that there is quite a gaping hole. And I guess they kind of got away with that scene because it was quite darkly lit. Once again, love Doomsday holding up Superman like that, as in the death of Superman. Jordan can't hear his heart beating. And I know I'm saying the obvious here, but Elizabeth Tulloch's acting in this moment is the most literal Lois reaction I could ever have hoped to have seen. And the way they made this scene hit even harder with the flashbacks to just their love story, I will fully admit here, not one, not two, I had like a few tears go. I mean, I wasn't like, but like, tears were flowing. I just don't see how they can't be if you're invested in this character and in this show. Now, the thing that really intrigues me in this moment is the next scene. We see something being delivered to Luthor, like some kind of equipment. At first, I thought it could be a way for him to tackle Superboy, because obviously this follows the scene where Otis informed him that, okay, there's another person with powers. And I still feel like, even though we're going to talk about this again in episode 2 in a way, that there is definitely more to this box, even though it seems to be the same box that the heart was kept in, because we have Lex's assistant or lady, whatever, saying that Milton assured her this would work. The last thing that Brainiac needs is this going to his head. So this was definitely a reference to the Milton Fine version of Brainiac, and lots of people are speculating that this is going to be Tom Cavanagh's character in the show. And when speaking about Tom Cavanaugh's character at Comic-Con, he said there's a lot of cameos, more than any other season, I would say, this year, but that came out because it's a character in the comics, and I mean, it's like somebody met Tom Cavanagh, went back in time, created this character, and then was like, hey guys, you should cast this guy, like that. It was the easiest casting of all time. And Todd Helbing also said that he calls Amanda's, okay, so her name's Amanda, maybe I completely missed that, her comment about Milton and this brain Brainiac as intentional, saying that there will be more to come with Brainiac in future episodes. During a previous interview, Helbing told us that a significant character from the comics would be referenced early in the final season. You hear the name drop, then you start hearing that name drop more, and then you see that person eventually. So I'm so fascinated as to what they're doing here, because you have Lex on the map, you have Doomsday, who's not defeated, but now you got Brainiac coming into the fold, played by Tom Cavanaugh in some way, shape, or form. I guess he's going to be allied with Luthor. I do suppose that once Superman is back, that obviously with Superman being back, you know, he can maybe handle multiple threats, but it still beats me because he got killed by Doomsday. He's still around. Brainiac's there. So exciting things to come. So now, as we get into episode 2, things really ramp up quite a bit. Lois tells Jordan to take Clark's body back to the fortress because, I mean, that's the only option you have. And Lara starts surrounding Clark's body in this Kryptonian pool of some kind. It's kind of like the Kryptonian tech equivalent of the Star Wars back-to-tank fluid, if you will. But she's kind of a bit worried about her son, even though she's like a AI kind of consciousness version of her, and how, well, you know, his heart's missing, and you can't, you know, regenerate organs, so this is pretty bad. But I did like the idea of how, okay, with maybe a few things, you know, in mind, maybe if we got the heart back and put it into his chest, they might be able to, you know, maybe do something to resuscitate him and start the healing process. I find that kind of stuff believable. And again, I love the fortress location. I love the effects of how this, you know, stasis chamber got created for Clark. This is why I'm still so impressed with the show. I feel like even if it didn't have this level of effects, I would still be happy with the story that they're telling and the performances they give. And a few scenes later, we have Jordan explaining that Lara placed Clark in this altered state of existence. It's actually how Kryptonians rehabilitate their criminals, by placing them into suspended animation, kind of like how Clark came down to Earth in a pod. And I mean, I guess they did it and put him in suspended animation so he wouldn't decay, but I mean, it's not like he's alive with his heart out. I mean, I know in the death of Superman and what we've seen in recent years, like even with Henry Cavill's Superman, you could argue he wasn't quite dead. And I don't know if they've made that super clear here. I mean, maybe they did. Without a heart, I guess you are dead. But maybe they're just thinking with the Kryptonian tech, if we do something, it will start healing. I don't know. I'm really intrigued as to how they bring Superman back. Obviously, he needs his heart back, but isn't that still a little bit of a leap with how, if he's dead, even if you put his organ back in there, why would it start the healing process again? I hope they execute that well, because it does make me feel like no matter what instance Superman is in the future, whether he gets delimbed, whatever organ gets ripped out, as long as they have that organ and plop him back into the fortress, you can just kind of put it in again and resuscitate him. And that just kind of, you know, gets rid of any stakes for the character. So I'm not trying to like put a downer on it, but it is something that I think they need to pull off in a believable way, even with Kryptonian tech in mind. Now, a few scenes later, we have Jonathan confront Jordan about where he's been. And I really like the story they've given Jonathan here. I think it's like really good material for him to just deal with, because he's in such a difficult position. Because he wants his dad back. He knows his brother is Kryptonian enabled, if you will, but obviously it's so sketchy because, you know, if you don't tell mom about it and we don't go into this with a fully thought out plan, then you could get killed or hurt too. Or, as we kind of learn, jeopardize your chance at even getting the heart back, the one key or chance you have at saving dad. Yet at the same time, I think he's also in that rough position of maybe Jordan is a little bit right, because if we tell mom, she might take us away from this opportunity, and time is of the essence. And this is where we get that scene between Luthor and Jordan, and where he really kind of messed up here. Now, this was after a meeting about Luthor Corp dropping by 20% and trying to encourage Luthor to do something about it, and maybe he's in a little bit of a place to do that now after soaking in and celebrating Superman's death. But the reason why this was such a mistake from Jordan is that Luthor really basically found out in this moment that Jordan, the Superboy, was the son of Kal-El, Superman, and it, putting the pieces together, it exposed the Kent's secret. And it wasn't so much of a, I was thinking in this moment, it is very obvious after the diner and him knowing what Jordan, Lois Lane's son, looks like. You can see right through Jordan's goggles, so you can tell his identity. So it wasn't so much of a suspension of disbelief issue here, because that probably isn't the way that Luthor recognized him. It was more the way Superboy was reacting. I loved how unfearing Luthor was of another powered, Kryptonian. When you make an enemy, you have to commit. Next time you come after me, you better be ready to kill me. So Lois completely unloads on Jordan furiously about what he's done, telling him that he knows now about his father's identity. And I thought this was a really well acted scene between them both. And you can tell that Lois felt quite bad when she said and shouted at him, "You are not ready yet. You are not your father." And then she adds, "Not yet anyway." In that moment, you could see that she was thinking about how that sounded out of anger, and she didn't want to say, well, it's not like you won't be, but yeah, it still came across a certain way, which obviously propels Jordan to obviously feel like he could never live up to his father's name. So he still goes on to ignore Lois in this moment with the opportunity that he has in finally hearing his heartbeat. And Jonathan is very clearly pointing out that this is a trap, but in Jordan's overconfidence, he's like, well, but that's their mistake then. The reason why I look past how stupid this is because they're kids. And, the reason why you could argue it's stupid is because if they went Jonathan's way, told Lois maybe they could go in guns blazing with Steel as well. That would have been really formidable. Natalie potentially in the suit, Steel in the suit, Jordan. And I have to admit, I was thinking how is the heart beating? I was just figuring maybe Lex has got it on a bypass machine where it's keeping it alive, which, leads me to the next scene when he goes into the diner, meets Sarah. Luthor is aware and is baiting them all into this situation. And this is what I like so much about this Luthor, because it's, showing his smarts, showing how he is being manipulative and has a plan that nobody is really aware of until it's a bit too late, which is when we get glimpses at that plan more and more as these scenes unfold. And Lois gets a call from Clark in, a fake voice. And think how disgusting this is. Your husband's just died and Luthor has now rung you up with a voice generator matching Clark. And I really like how in this part of the episode, we have both brothers in peril with, scenes going back and forth, showing the tactics behind Luthor's master plan. And what's even more diabolically disgusting about Luthor's plan here is she gets rung about, which son do you love more? Then with a voicemail voice saying, if you want Jordan to live, press 1. If you want Jonathan to live, press 2. It's just so mockingly haunting. It's brilliant. And when Jordan found the heartbeat, the Superman toy, I didn't know how I felt about it at first. How would Jordan recognize that? But I suppose with my headcanon here, I guess they could have recorded the actual beat of Clark's heart being 3 times and maybe amplified it at a frequency that they would know Jordan would hear. Now, Jonathan, who went to sneak into Lex's house, managed to get out of there with the help of Lana. But predictably, and if you've seen the trailers here, you knew what was going to happen. Jordan got absolutely blasted with 4 different guns depowering him. And it also flashbacks to that scene that we got with them both, with Clark being in a very similar situation. We have the guards approach him pretty stupidly, and Jordan manages to take them out. But one thing I like about what this next moment showed is that Luthor comes in with a frequency that completely disables Jordan. And it's something that I think Clark may have been able to deal with, but it just reflects the inexperience and what Lois was saying and how he's not ready. He's not his father. not yet. So I do think Superman would have been able to maybe deal with that, because it's not like kryptonite. It's very disabling to a Kryptonian, but yeah, Jordan just isn't quite equipped to deal with this right now. So Luthor manages to have the upper hand in this situation. But cutting back to the answering machine voice, Lois was being faced at losing both her sons if she doesn't choose, and my mouth dropped when she actually pressed a number, because you felt that. I mean, you know, in one way, I mean, you'd kind of have to, right? A chance of saving at least one of your kids, but it would absolutely rip your heart out. Like, no pun intended there, but you could see even Lois's reaction when she pressed the number. It's like the wind got kicked out of her, and I almost like felt that simultaneously, because you realize what she's done. She's chosen one of the boys. And I think, you know, the camera shot was going towards Jonathan, but I think honestly she may have chosen Jordan. Why do I think that? I don't really know. I think there's a couple of reasons, maybe because I think it further propels Jonathan's story in terms of how he's always felt like the, you know, non-special son, the non-powered son. And if this was to ever get out, if he learns that she pressed 1 for Jordan instead of him, I think it just maybe would bring up those insecurities about my own mother didn't choose. I mean, he would probably, after some time, understand how it's like an impossible decision to even make, but nevertheless, a decision was made. And it wasn't me, Jonathan. Do you know what I mean? That's heart-wrenching. But you just know that Luthor is going to use this down the road. I mean, I can't guarantee that, but with where Jonathan feels in the scenes after this through what gets revealed, it would just catapult him even more into the frustration that he has, not only with Jordan, but now maybe his mum again. Because that's actually been a bit of a recurring thing in the show, Jonathan's issues with the family, his mum, and he's finally got to a place in where he's accepted, I guess, being non-powered and a bit closer with his family. But this, I'm not saying it's going to dismantle everything, but oh man, who did Lois choose? And what would also be interesting is if they never revealed it. But I don't know if I believe that, because this is just gold to mine for Luthor to be used against the family. As Lois said in the scene after this, when Jonathan gets home, she reveals this is what he wants. He wants us to turn against each other. But he has goddamn good ammunition if you think about it. She chose one of her sons and disregarded the other to live. That is like not just turning the family against each other. It's something that is low-key, sadly, authentic of a weapon to use against Lois and the family at the same time. But back to Jordan on the floor, Luthor comes in and he presents that box that he was given to do with Brainiac at the end of last episode that houses the heart at a certain temperature. And he says, I could kill you in this moment, take you away from your mother forever, but I'm not going to, but I have to take something. And he crushes the heart with his foot. And the fallout of this scene, I thought it was so well acted. It was so heartbreaking, because obviously Jordan was being so propelled into just saving his dad, and now this is like, that heart being crushed is just symbolic of now dad is dead. That is it. So the anguish that is acted out with the screams in this moment, again, haunting, heartbreaking, and just the villainy of Luthor simultaneously being so brilliantly highlighted. Obviously, I'm asking questions to myself. Is this really Superman's heart? And just to critique it, maybe a bit of a nitpick here. Since the heart was left behind, Jordan could have taken that to the fortress and got it tested to see if it matches Clark's DNA. Do you know what I mean? Like, because if it doesn't turn out to be his heart, that's going to definitely be not a nitpick anymore, but a criticism that I will bring up later. Because, I mean, that'd be the first thing I'd do. I'd be crushed, just like Jordan is. I'd be thinking that, okay, my dad, the chance of saving him is gone, but just to check, let's see if this is his heart. But also, you could argue with that in mind, what if his heart could be repaired at the fortress, like regenerated and then put back into Clark's body? There's a couple of just different options here, of which they hope that you don't think about. Do you know what I mean? So that's probably only one of my issues that I found in the scenes of this episode. But also, by the way, if it actually was his heart, yeah, man, like, what are they going to do? Like, what are they going to do? So that's why I'm thinking the heart still is out there. But they could have found that out already if they just did a little bit of a DNA test. Jordan's guilt when he's back in the Gazette and when Lois and Jonathan arrive, he is just a kid. So it's just all such a tragic story. And this is what I meant earlier. You see that anger in Jonathan's face, because he was being, a lot more like, hey, we should think about this before executing it. Again, they could have got Steel involved if he wasn't busy, I suppose, but I guess that's the excuse if they would have gone down that road. But either way, Jonathan is going to have a lot of issues with his brother from this moment on, I think, in the next episode and beyond before Clark gets back. That's just going to cause all this conflict that Luthor wants. This is why I'm enjoying this storyline so much with the way things are being executed and the plots are being executed, because it's going to cause such turmoil. And you can see where Jonathan is even justified in his anger in those scenes, and where he's not really, or he's going to struggle to forgive his brother with how impulsive he was, and, potentially losing that one chance to save their dad. Towards the very end of the episode now, we have Lex's lady, I think Amanda, say that Lane knew more than what he's letting on with regards to Elizabeth's location, so it's good to know that they're gonna, follow up with him, and Sam Lane is gonna be in the season a bit more. Now, as for Lana, we know that she's trying to do the right thing and take away the sale of Lex's property, but there was that moment when she found out, in the scene with Sarah back at home, that Clark was dead, but she also said that it's not them both standing up to Luthor, it's her. She doesn't know how Lex is going to retaliate, but when he does, he has to direct it at me. And I was just thinking, that's so naive for you to think. Like, I admire your decision to, try and help out, but you must know that you're putting your family in danger. Like, Lois warned her, and why does she just think that he's not going to put kids on the table here with Lana? Then we get that very touching scene where they go back to the fortress now to say goodbye to Clark, because, things do seem to be kind of over at this point. And Laura reveals that he left something for them, which is basically an AI version of the consciousness of Clark that he created when they made this version of the fortress, but he didn't tell them because that's right when Lois got sick, so it wasn't really the best opportunity to do so. I like the suit in a way. It's a nice, homage to the silver Death of Superman symbol, if you will, and maybe we could get something like that when he comes back. Wasn't so much of a fan about how those shoulder bits come down this far. That looked a bit cheapish to me, but that aside, it must be so painful to be able to see your loved one in a form in where they can communicate, because it's like a download of the brain's consciousness in a way, but it's not really them. And this is what subverted my expectations the most. I really felt like, I wouldn't have said it would have been rushed, but I felt like Clark, the whole Clark returning, the Death of Superman thing, I don't know if I would describe it as wrapped up by the end of episode 2, but I thought that's why they were doing a double episode premiere, because they wanted to get that story, right? Get Clark back by the end of episode 2, and then still have this whole threat of Luthor, Doomsday still out there, now Brainiac being teased. But he's not back still. He's still there with a freaking hole in his chest, saying that it's just going to have to be the three of you out there, and that he'll be here whenever they need help, however he can offer it. And it's like, damn. So I'm not saying it's going to go to episode 5 before Clark, comes back from the dead, if you will. But maybe the AI version of himself will kind of help train Jordan up for the next episode or 2. Maybe the AI version of Clark will last in episode 3, but episode 4 will be the return. I don't know. I would love to know any theories there. I mean, I'm not even going to entertain the idea that Tyler Hoechlin's Clark doesn't even come back at all. I think we can all believe that he's going to. But yeah, it's quite a nice surprise in a way that they're longing it out a bit more than what I thought they were going to. But ladies and gentlemen, that is where the episode ends. So if you couldn't tell already, everything that we saw in these first 2 episodes was so compelling, very emotional, well written, to the point of, other than my couple of nitpicks here and there, that I feel like leave some things that would or should be addressed. But with that aside, the rest of the season that's set up is still so very strong with how every character is going to navigate the issues that are ahead of them. With Luthor, the teasers of Brainiac and where that could go. Doomsday is still technically a threat out there. The performances are great. What more could I really ask for out of a final season of Superman and Lois? And, knowing that it's only 10 episodes, I am very excited, because I'm a fan of short form seasons in this sense, because it allows every episode to be very basically plot driven all the time. There's not these little side stories that sure can be appreciated, that some people call filler sometimes when it's indulged too much in a season. But now we know, with the episodes we got, it's just always going to be plot driven, main plot, scene to scene to scene to scene. And out of that, offers a very, very engrossing season, especially if executed as well as these first couple of episodes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I would love to know your thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Superman and Lois Season 4. Please don't forget to leave your theories down in the comments below as well. If you liked this video, would really appreciate your support and just leaving that like, especially if you've made it to this part, and consider subscribing for more videos just like this. But I'm gonna have to love you and leave you now. I'll get to editing this because I'm getting it out a bit late. So just thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. I'll see you fellow Kryptonians in the next video. Goodbye.